This is the March 20th meeting of the Offshore Wind Advisory Committee. We'll start by saluting the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, let me just silence this. Okay. All right, so if anyone has taken a look at the agenda, first item on the agenda today is kind of follow-up from our Vineyard Offshore. If any of you are at that or actually have seen it online, Vineyard Offshore was here at our last meeting, presented their plans, what their thought process was, and obviously anyone coming out of that meeting can see that they were talking. Much of their focus was on the New London portion of their project, and really kind of deflected a lot of the questions and statements and about Westport specifically. So we did have some follow-up questions. I did get those emailed to me yesterday afternoon. I will forward it to committee members as well. There were a couple of PDFs attached. I'll just go through just a few of the questions and then a few things that I was able to glean from my discussions with Rick from yesterday as well. I know there was a lot brought up in the last meeting about the decommissioning of the turbines and how to address the decommissioning of said turbines. They essentially have come back with a short answer with the extent that the federal government requires them to issue a bond prior to construction, and many of the details on the decommissioning would be in their COP, which is filed with the federal government. So again, that was everything that's already publicly available. I don't think it's any more analysis that we're looking for with respect to their plans. If I know the questions came up as to if they no longer existed, if the company had been sold off numerous times, but their pushback on that is, again, they have it in their plans with the federal government, and that was the answer kind of to that first question we had.
I have a question about that.
Sure.
I have read in several locations and on the BOEM website that they have suspended, they're not requiring any of the wind companies to put down any money before construction begins, to my understanding. In fact, they're not asking them to put down any money at all until 15 years into operation. So do you think they understood the question?
I can send a follow-up to Rick and Vineyard Offshore and for specifications on that outside of their BOEM if we want to push it a little bit further and just ask that.
Well, yeah, that's kind of a big deal.
Okay.
For the decommissioning. Mm-hmm. My understanding was that none of the companies are being required to put down anything in escrow, any money up front for decommissioning until after 15 years of operation.
Okay. And that was probably prior to the administration. I mean, I don't know if the process will change if they do move forward or allowing projects to move forward federally, but I'll follow up with that question just to get an understanding. I only have what they provided back to me, and again, I will forward it to everyone, and I will mark that for sending that back to them.
Well, his answer said they're required to post a bond.
Yes, bond prior to construction and the details to that bond.
Prior to construction.
So can you explain what that would mean?
Yeah. So, for example, in planning board, we do that with any construction, any development. The developer has to post a bond, which is essentially an insurance policy. So, like an insurance policy, you're paying a little bit of money for an insurance policy for a lot of money. And it means that if you default on the construction, in the planning board, it's housing development, for example, or you fail to construct the necessary roads or drainage or anything, you walk away from the project. Then the insurance policy kicks in and you have enough money to complete the project. So they pay, relatively speaking, a little bit of money, but the insurance policy, the bond, has enough money, and it's, you know, it's like an insurance company is a reputable, it's Lloyd's or whoever it is, that is there to guarantee whatever needs to be done, in this case, the decommissioning. So I think what is, and it's routinely done before you start work, before you get permission to begin. And so I'd be very surprised, I've never, ever heard that you post the bond, you know, after you get your permits, because that'd be ridiculous. And so I think it sounded from Jake that his answer was, we're required to do a bond, that's the insurance policy, and in order to get the permit. And what that means is he put up some amount of money, but the bond is enough to cover the decommissioning.
So my question.
So I think that if you, I don't mind the follow-up question.
Yeah.
But it's important to ask the question in a way
Correctly, okay.
that deals with the normal way of doing it is, were you required to post a bond? Did you would you be posting a bond if you're going to do the project? And do you do it in advance of construction?
And what about, because it has nothing to do with construction, but decommissioning, what about, could you ask them who the insurance company would be?
So that was my next thought is A, who the insurance company is, and then B, what is the amount, right? We know we are
Yeah.
in a situation right now where rising costs over the past 3 or 4 years of the construction of these.
Yeah, would it cover the cost?
Yeah, would it
of
cover the cost?
decommissioning?
Well, Jake, I'd like to
And
ask,
it is invested. I mean, if it's at 20 million now, 20 million in 15 years is probably not going to be worth anything.
Well, the insurance company, that's
Yeah.
how they make their money, is they,
I'd like to know if the bond is with the company or is it with the permit? Because these companies change hands annually. And would that nullify the bond if the bond goes with the permit or the lease?
Or
That's a
project.
whole different
Yeah.
story.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
All right. That was, so that was the first question we had. The second one, which obviously is an
Does
issue.
anybody else have any
Sorry.
questions about that?
Okay.
Could shed some light?
Yes, sir.
Constance is correct. Boehm has written documents stating that they're giving a waiver for 15 years on decommissioning costs.
On the 15 years. Okay.
And, you know, I, like Mr. Bullock, was on the planning board of Dartmouth, and we did put a bond on construction, and that is not decommissioning.
Yeah.
And
Right.
when we did solar farms, we did put money aside, but I can tell you right now, due to the high cost of decommissioning solar panels in the future, we don't have enough money, so.
To cover that. Okay. Thank you, sir. The second one, which was obviously an impact to Westport last year with the faulty blade, I know that it came up in the discussions, and where do the faulty blades go? Essentially, they pushed back and said it's a GE Verona question, and we understand they're sent back essentially to the country of origin for either fix or study of those blades that broke. That is the answer for that one.
To faulty blade heaven.
The third question was, and this was one that was brought up by our co-chair, Rick, what available information can you share regarding EMFs and their impact on fin fish and shellfish? As said, on March 4th, we shared with the State Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs that there is a follow-up needed with the committee by, obviously, the State Division of Marine Fisheries on this topic, as the committee indicated that DMF was due to respond to the committee. So they have essentially reached out to the state to see if they had EMF data to share with us with respect to its impact on finfish and shellfish. So we are,
Just as a note, the state hasn't got back to us at
for the
my
others.
requests on the first meeting we had when Dan McKinnon, or what, I think that's his name.
Yeah, Dan McKiernan.
Yeah, he sat right here, he said he'd get back to us, and still waiting.
I can hit them, try to hit them up again on that as well. Obviously, it looks like Vineyard Offshore reached out on that, but that's basically pushing that back.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I agree. I think that it's one thing to have the developer tell us what impact they have on fish and other marine life. It's another thing to have us work with not just DMF, but SMAST is right nearby, and they've done an awful lot of work in this area. And they said they have funds for us to access to do studies on impact. And they've been conducting a lot of studies already on impact on the marine environment of offshore wind. And frankly, I'd rather hear more directly from SMAST on impacts of offshore wind on marine life than I would from a developer saying what the impact is on marine life.
And SMAS, could you tell us what that acronym?
Oh, yeah, sorry. SMAST is part of University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, and it's located in the south end of New Bedford, and it's the School of Marine Science and Technology. And they've done an awful lot of work, and what I think characterizes SMAST is they do an awful lot of work with participation by the industry in collecting data. They use fishermen, their crews, and their boats in collecting data, so they're, and you can back me up on this if you want, they're a trusted resource in terms of science.
Even though they get lots of grant money from offshore?
They get
wind?
grant money from, as every university does.
From the federal government, but that it's specific to offshore wind?
Every university gets grant money, and federal grant money is being taken away from a lot of universities now. But they work very closely and have from the beginning with the fishing industry. And the fishing industry really trusts them.
I just got off, actually, in the same vein. They're doing a big project over there, DMF at CMAS is doing a big project on water temperature and the outfalls of the pollution of the shellfish beds over there. And we had a Zoom call this afternoon. It's funny you bring that up right now, because they were literally just on a Zoom call about some of the programs that they have. So they're very active over there. I think it would be worth just knocking on the door and seeing what they have to say. And, we don't ask, we don't know,
And I think we had that discussion at the last meeting of hopefully lining up guests here in the future that, to provide us that necessary data and information that we're looking for.
The dean of SMAS, Kevin Stokesbury, lives on Forge Pond Road. He's a local guy.
Okay.
So,
All right.
knows Westport well.
The fourth question we had, asking for follow-up, which this had made me chuckle a little bit. What does horizontal directional drilling look like in general? They sent me a link to a YouTube video that was 2 minutes long that was published by Ørsted. So I was a little,
Yeah.
I was a little concerned with that, but that was a 2-minute tutorial on what a horizontal directional drilling looks like. So that was the response to that
Can
question.
you share that?
I will, and when I send, I'll send
Yeah.
this email to everyone, and it'll have the links in there for everyone to look at with respect to that.
2 minutes, you'll never get back.
I think it's 1:51. I rounded up.
Was the question?
Time is precious.
Was the question really directed at what it looks like from the surface or what it looks like under? underground.
I think the question was specifically is what would we see as Westport residents and the impact on our environment and, above, like, I think you brought up the question of what, is it going to be clear cutting? Is it going to be, what type, where are they putting it? Is it in the road layout? Would it be, making the 200-foot buffer off of the highway? So I think we were asking a little bit more specific on the project as opposed to generally what horizontal.
Well, they
direction
wouldn't
is.
be doing horizontal directional drilling up 88. They would be just doing, they'd be trenching.
Trenching it.
And they'd be burying the cable under, 6, 7, 8 feet.
Okay.
But they would be doing horizontal directional drilling, or bringing it in under Horseneck Beach and then up into the parking lot.
Okay.
And we've got plenty of photographs of what that looks like at Covell's Beach on the Cape. So they've been through it, and there's lots of photographs about what it looked like when they took it through town, and they built a substation. So there's lots of photographs about what it looks like taking it up a roadway in Norfolk, Virginia. So there are a couple of, projects that have already been built out that have brought in horizontal directional drilling and then trenched it and built substations. So we could, if that's what, I just didn't understand what the question was about, I guess. And, we can find that information.
On our own, yeah. Okay. And just a follow-up to that, I know Mike Sullivan, who was at the hearing last month, asked the question on specifically the Westport River. I know somebody pointed out in the crowd that they thought that the cable would not have been, directional drill under the river. There was going to be laid on top. And in speaking to Vineyard Offshore, they said that is their worst case last scenario. They don't want any cabling, obviously,
Yeah.
exposed or going above the river. So that's not an option. Even if this project were to go forward, it would have to go under the river unless it was a last resort where that would be what they had to do. I know there was a discussion probably from some union members in the crowd, how many jobs would Vineyard Wind 2 likely produce and the economic impact of that. It largely depends on, their answer is largely depends on several factors that will be ironed out as the various review processes move forward. And I was a PDF attached with an economic report, impact report from Vineyard Wind 1. Again, when I forward that email, you guys can read the 46-page economic impact document for Vineyard Wind 1.
Bring up my printer.
Yeah, you don't print it out.
Don't print it.
That would be a large environmental impact with all that printer paper. And I'm trying, the last one we had was, is salt water used to cool substations? If so, what does it look like? How much water? Where is it treated? The impacts to the local, ocean temperature around the facilities. Attached, you will find a recent BOEM white paper regarding cooling offshore converter stations. And it was I did open that up and looked at it. It was a BOEM paper from, I believe, 2022, which probably may be obsolete at this point. But anyway, that was the answer to that question as well.
Well, it depends on if they have open loop or closed loop systems. And the open loop systems is what they've got going on right now, but they are outlawed in New York waters.
Okay.
But even though Empire Wind, will that be in New York waters? Okay, so I'm not sure what they will do with their substation, or does all the power just go to New York, and it's not in New York waters. I'm not sure. It's in New Jersey waters. But New York doesn't allow it, but we do. And I've...
Is that a state regulation?
Yeah.
Okay, so Massachusetts allows that as opposed, and so the question would be to follow up is, would it be an open loop or closed?
And I
loop?
think it depends on whether or not it's DC or AC. And I'd have to look into it more, but I believe that DC, but see, I think that Vineyard Wind 1 is AC, so they don't require the same kind of open loop system as big of a substation, but I know that the converter substations, because all the power that comes off of the turbines is AC. And then it's connected back into a converter substation with inner array cables. And so at that substation, then if it's converted to DC, like this project would be, because it's way out there, then that would be, and it's, in my reading of the COP, for this project, Vineyard Wind 2, it would be an open loop substation. And it takes in around 8 million gallons of water every day and infuses it with basically with bleach, because it has to keep organisms from growing in the substation so that it doesn't clog things up. And it then pumps it back out into the ocean at about 90 degrees. So that's about 8 million gallons a day. And I believe that is for I'm like 90-something% sure that that's for the DC converter station. And I'm not exactly sure about the AC booster station. But
Okay.
you would think that they could give us a little bit more information.
Okay. I can follow up with that question as well. And that was the end of the list of the questions that they had answered. The other thing that was interesting that came out, and I asked him specifically, I know we were talking at the last meeting about the new administration, and with respect to, is there a pause in place? What's happening with many of these projects nationwide, and even on the West Coast. He did say that he was not aware that anything had been started. I know the Trump administration said there was going to be a 6-month, essentially, moratorium when they had the opportunity to study and research further the permitting process, the licensing process, and collect data on these projects. And he said he's not even aware that anything has been started. So the clock would essentially start when they began this study or research from the federal level. And so he says that he doesn't even believe the 6-month start, or let's say 6-month pause, has actually begun. So that's kind of where we're at there. He had no clue what the administration's plan was on that, whether they actually will do research or a study on it or just leave it open-ended. But an interesting fact, as he did mention at that meeting about the New London landing, he did say that Vineyard Offshore is conducting and will be conducting in the next week or next week surveying in Connecticut, in New London, for actually moving forward. Essentially, he just said that the surveying that will be done in Connecticut is to hopefully after the pause, they can move forward with their actual project. So I think they're just trying to make sure that they don't fall too far behind with respect to not doing anything during this kind of limbo that everyone's in with respect to the federal government. So he did mention they were doing surveying. That was nothing more extensive than
Surveying for placing laying the cable.
My guess would be yes.
So I just learned about, which I'm sure Rick can speak with and John can speak with, anybody that's been doing fishing, about a place called The Race. And apparently it's where the whole Long Island Sound empties out back and forth into Block Island. And I think it'd be interesting to find out about, apparently it's an incredibly strong current because it's a very narrow area. And my understanding of looking at the map is that they'll be taking that cabling through The Race. They don't have any other option. So I don't know if anybody knows anything about any fishing.
I've sailed through there many times.
So you don't think there'd be any problem with them keeping that? How would they keep it trenched down? Do you think it would stay?
Well, it depends how deeply they bury it, but yeah.
Well, that's, the problem with the race is the incredible current that runs through there. It's deep, it's 170 feet deep in spots. It's very, as John knows, it's a very busy waterway. There's a lot of tug and barge traffic through there, a lot of ships coming through there. It's a big deal. The other alternative, to me, not that it's our business, but just for point of conversation, would be the Watch Hill Passage, which is pretty much basically north of that. Much narrower. Problem is, it goes by Taylor Swift's house.
Yeah.
Do I have to say any more? It's not as ferocious. The current, the tide doesn't roar through there as much as it does out on the race. What happens is the race sets between Long Island and Fisher's Island, and Watch Hill Pass is between Fisher's Island and
The mainland.
Watch Hill.
Watch Hill. And then it goes down into eastern New York, eastern Long Island Sound. So I don't know. I mean, if it was my money, I wouldn't be, I mean, I think the shorter route would be, but again, it's not our business for this meeting, but I would think the shorter route would be through Watch Hill. It would certainly be a lot friendlier if you have to put spud barges out there and everything to.
Yeah.
Or
do
straight
all
on
that
to Long Island.
But
It's just curious because I like to watch all the different scenarios of how this might play out, just because I'm interested in it, and also if they run into problems, then I'm of course don't want them to pivot back to Westport.
And actually, I can ask that in passing with him. Obviously, he
Yeah.
provided me the surveying information and say, hey, where you headed?
Although if he didn't know about it, let's not tell him.
Mr. Chair, my sense is that the industry is looking at this as that there are two projects that are going forward, and that's Dominion in Virginia and Vineyard Wind, and everyone else is saying that this is a 4-year pause, and they're just planning on that.
So you think on that, this Vineyard Offshore 2 or just one? You're saying
Yeah,
one will.
the first Vineyard.
Okay, and then the other two will be.
Everyone else is saying this is,
Yeah.
4 years of
Mr. Chairman, I think in that vein of the last conversation, it would be worth having that conversation with Rick to see what they say, because if they anticipate issues of huge expenses and how they're going to get to Groton or New London, that puts a spotlight back on Westport, which brings it back to what we're here for. So I think that would be a viable question to ask him, or have him ask somebody to at least get some idea on what they're thinking.
I think their concern right now is they just have no idea with BOEM and because they're only, if you correct me if I'm wrong, Constance, probably 40 to 50% through the federal process?
They're not even 40 or
Okay.
50% through. They might be like 30%. They don't have any of their federal, the 10 of the permits that they need at the federal level. They're moving through them, but they've not been granted any of them yet, so.
So that may even, to John's point, that may leave us with a situation where they're sitting there for 4 years waiting
Yeah.
for an answer.
Yeah.
And-
Yes, but one addendum to that, John, is that Empire Wind and Sunrise Wind are going forward. They're both starting pile driving on May 1. And Empire Wind is a huge project, as is Sunrise. Well over 100, I think Sunrise is over 100 turbines. I don't know, I'd have to look, but
Is that what's coming ashore in Falmouth?
no,
No.
that's, I believe, the one that's coming ashore. Was that not South Coast that wanted to come to shore in Falmouth? I think that was South Coast, which is sort of backed off right now.
Okay.
I may be wrong. It could be. I think it's South Coast.
South Coast is backed off.
Yeah, but they were the ones, I believe, that wanted to come into Falmouth.
Yeah.
But Empire Wind and Sunrise Wind
Yeah, you're right.
are apparently
They're-
starting May
If they
1.
haven't started, but they have started, I guess.
Yeah.
If they haven't started, they're not going to start.
They say that they've been advertising that they're starting, and the Mariners reports say
Yeah.
that they are beginning pile driving on May 1, as Revolution Wind will too.
Yeah.
They have to wait until May 1 because of the North Atlantic right whale and because
Yeah.
of migration, but after that, they start back up again.
So,
Maybe, does anybody else have any comments on?
What makes you think that they're gonna bury the cables from the offshore field to the onshore interconnect versus just laying it on the seabed based on the bathymetric surveys that they're doing now and covering it with some stone?
Well, they cover with stone anyway, even if they do, right, to keep it in place.
Well, it depends on where if they can't get it down far enough, then
Yeah.
they call them mattresses, or they bring in like tons of boulders from Canada, I believe, and dump it on top of them for scouring protection. So no, that would be a possibility. If they couldn't get it dug down deep enough there, they would just dump a bunch of boulders on top of it.
And I think that goes to the point that I think I've made and others have made with, they haven't even looked at the extent of what they would have to do going up 88 with respect to, obviously, a lot of stream crossings, a lot of wetlands. And I joke with everyone here, if you try to dig a hole in your backyard to put a fence in Westport, you're going to run into a heck of a lot of boulders and rocks. So it may be a little bit more of a difficult task than they think. And I know they haven't, since they are doing surveying in Connecticut, at least we know that that's going a little bit, further with that project, since they haven't even looked at, the extent of it. And somebody recently told me that in their research, they were talking about it, it would cost about $1 million per mile. So think about it, you're running about 11 miles up 88. I mean, that's a big expense if you're doing, $10 to $12 million just in the landfall to get it to maybe a substation or what have you. So I mean, right now we're obviously in the same position as we were last month with what they provided to us. Nothing has changed. And I asked him point blank, has anything changed with respect to anything for Westport? He said no. And then that's when we kind of got into the federal stuff and what the administration is doing. And I think, they're probably a little bit in the dark as well with how that's going to progress for their projects. So to John's point, they may just be sitting there and hoping they can hold out for 4 years with and waiting for a change or whatever happens in 4 years.
Well, their cabling route through to Connecticut is a lot longer than it would be to Westport. But then once they get on shore, they have much more ready access to hook into the grid over there than they do here. And that's in our favor because one of the climate bill that was passed back in November that the guys, the people came down from Boston to talk to us about, one of the caveats of it is that supposedly they look to areas that already have infrastructure to support green energy siting instead of, that should be an inherent bias in their choices as to where to go, so as to not go into areas that don't already have infrastructure and that would be expensive and also disruptive ecologically. So let's hope.
So I found the comments about ISO New England very interesting. Can you hear me though?
I think they need it for,
The TV
they
can.
need it for TV. We have very great ratings here, so just,
I'm Bruce Bennett. I live in Masquerade Meadows. I wasn't able to come to the February meeting, but you guys did a great job, by the way. And I've looked at the YouTube. The ISO New England there's an interconnect agreement in the progress for ISO New England for the Groton site. I wonder if you guys should be looking at what ISO New England has to say about a Westport interconnect. Because that cable's going up 88, if it ever did go up 88, it would have to end somewhere and connect. And an interconnect agreement is a common thing for power generation projects.
And Rick had mentioned in passing that the capacity or the ability in South Coast Massachusetts right now didn't really exist for that. As Constance has pointed out numerous times on the plan, they had blacked out or redacted possible locations for a substation, either in the north end of Westport or elsewhere. So that I know Rick did mention that there isn't really the availability to uptake this here in the South Coast currently.
There are large power line structures up there
Yeah.
that run across by
Correct.
White's, right?
Yep.
That's got to be the interconnect.
Yep.
Where it goes, I don't know, but ISO New England defines those interconnects. And as I said, I think they've made good progress for the Connecticut site. But if anyone in the future is interested in Westport, they're going to have to work with ISO New England to get an interconnect agreement.
And that was my one question when originally on the megawatts, when Connecticut didn't bid on the 400 megawatts of the 1,200 megawatt project, that the 800 was obviously going to Massachusetts. And that was my concern is, okay, does that mean it won't land in New London? And he said, no, that's because of a similar agreement. They can take it in New London and then obviously distribute it throughout all the region. So that is a positive for us, is that it has to, it can land there, and if Massachusetts decides to take all 1,200 megawatts, they can, and it still can get distributed from New London specifically.
To your point, Bruce, yeah, I have been, I keep an eye on the Department of Public Utilities and the ESB Energy Siting Board web page, and the minute that anything is on the docket, it's listed there. And so you can see if Westport is listed on, there's a link, and I can provide it to you. I actually did go call up and struggle through the National Grid site, where it's a lot more complex in trying to figure out where they're bringing new cable lines and putting in. You can find out where they're hooking into solar arrays and to and to onshore wind arrays, and you can look and see like what the megawatts are. But it's a real hard site to sort through. It takes a long time. But yes, it would be a. Could you do that for us, please? Because it's a bear to go through. Yeah, no, I mean, once you can do it, but it does take a while to get good at it and to sort of be able, it's just a lot of information, because they put everything in there, where they're hooking into everything. But they are right now, and this is on the ESB Energy Siting Board, Energy Facility Siting Board website, where they do have on the docket a whole build-out, upgrade of transmission lines that run from New Bedford to Dartmouth to Fall River. So that's on the docket right now, what they're doing. And I don't know if that has any connection with what we're talking about here or not, but they are doing that right now.
And they upgraded all those lines over there by Brayton Point too, right? All those that come across, those high utility power lines that come out of Brayton Point, under the assumption that, there will be a future landing there of some sort. So we have seen it. The question becomes does it, come to fruition? So right now, nothing drastically has changed with the Vineyard Offshore and kind of with the follow-ups, but I will reach back out to them with some of our questions that we came up with here this evening. Constance did a good lead-in. I think the next agenda item, which we have discussed a few times here, is the town, obviously this being a town committee, being granted intervenor status if a project does come here. The one caveat with that is that you can't apply for intervenor status, obviously, until a project is applied for through
On
the
the
state
docket.
or on the docket. And that was what Constance was talking about before, is that basically dashboard showing you the permitting and licensing process and where it begins. So until that would happen, we obviously don't have any, stake in the game with respect to getting the intervenor status. But I think we want to at least figure out what the options were. I think, Constance, you might have a little something to
Yes,
go
I
over
did
on
a
the
little,
intervenor
I
stuff?
did a little book report. So, and it's printed big, so I'll get through it in hopefully about 5 minutes, if y'all don't mind. So you do remember when the team came down from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs that came from Boston. They had a team of about 6 staff members and gave a 45-minute presentation on both on the recently passed Massachusetts 2024 climate bill, which they talked about, and the jurisdiction of the Energy Facilities Siting Board. I'll just call them the board from here on out. At our in the December meeting. And if anybody didn't see that, it's available on YouTube. The climate bill's purpose is to accelerate the state's, this is what's on their website, this is what they say. The climate bill's purpose is to accelerate the state's transition to clean energy. I will be going like that, but I won't keep doing that because I think everybody knows how I feel about is it clean or not. To clean energy, that is the build-out of large-scale wind, solar, battery storage, and electricity transmission infrastructure to meet its net zero greenhouse gas emissions target by 2050 and modernize the energy infrastructure. Municipalities are now required to issue a single permit for clean energy projects within 12 months, and the siting board must issue consolidated permits within 15 months. Failure to comply by a municipality hands the decision back to the siting board to ensure project timelines align with state climate goals. The new law does offer municipalities automatic intervenor status, which allows a town representative a seat on the 11-member board during the project's permitting process, although the town rep holds no veto power. The town would need to notify the siting board to confirm participation. So although it would grant it automatically, the town would have to notify that they wanted intervenor status. So let's talk specifics for Westport and the possibility that an offshore wind company may at some point seek to land high voltage export cables on Horseneck and perhaps build an electrical substation somewhere along Route 88 or north of I-95. Although the town would almost certainly be granted full intervenor status, it is important to note that other entities, such as the Westport River Watershed Alliance, the Westport Land Conservation Trust, POWW, abutting property owners, and commercial fisheries may also petition to intervene. Any group or individual seeking intervenor status must submit their petition within a set period, which is usually about 21 days, after the siting board's public notice of the project. That is, when it is placed on the docket. Although the municipalities are notified, it is up to the rest of us to watch for these notices. But I think I'm sure that our town would notify, we would know about it when our town is notified. You can go to mass.gov and search for EFSB, Energy Facilities Siting Board, and the Department of Public Utilities for open dockets. I do that about every couple weeks or so. As of last night, we were in the clear. Seeking intervenor status allows individuals, groups, or municipalities to have a formal role in the siting board's decision-making process beyond simply offering public comments. Here are a few reasons to pursue intervenor status, even though, as previously noted, under the Climate Bill rules, decision-making authority for clean energy siting has now been transferred to the state. Should an offshore wind company seek to land its cable on Horseneck Beach, drill it under the Westport River, and trench it up Route 88, the construction and EMF emissions would affect local land use, the river, and its fisheries, wetlands, and wildlife. So these are reasons why the town and hopefully others would want to apply for intervenor status. Certainly, traffic would be affected over the likely 2-year construction period. impacting economic activities. Should the company seek to build or collaborate with the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities or National Grid or Eversource to build a converter substation, which would be required should the export cables be HVDC. Concerns about possible fires, toxic chemical leaks into groundwater and wetlands and facility lighting would also come into play. Intervener status would allow for these concerns to be more fully considered. As an intervener, you can submit written questions, present evidence and expert witnesses, file briefs to formally challenge the developer's claims, for instance, about environmental safeguards or economic benefits. Interveners can advocate for specific conditions, like measures to reduce construction noise or compensate affected residents. This happens during evidentiary hearings, which follow the public comment phase. Unlike casual participants, interveners have the legal right to appeal the siting board's final decision if they believe it is flawed, giving the town and other interveners a little more leverage than they would otherwise have. If nonprofit organizations such as the Watershed or the Land Trust, along with concerned citizens or neighborhood groups, abutters, commercial fishermen, agriculture businesses, and perhaps POWW, were to apply for and receive full or partial intervener status, and all were to combine forces with the town, then who knows, maybe we could actually make a difference. We could at least make it hard for them. It would be good for any offshore wind developer that might be eyeing Westport to know that we will fight any cable landing, actively garner press coverage, and show this action for what it is: an undemocratic means to expedite federal and state climate goals on the backs of rural communities and small towns. A big dig that would be more judiciously located in already industrialized areas such as New Bedford or Boston itself. One more item. We should all be aware of the state's current plans for Article 97 properties. Article 97 protects public lands designated for conservation, natural resources, or recreational purposes. Horseneck Beach is an Article 97 property. Currently, the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, the same people responsible for the implementation of the climate bill that came to speak with us, are reviewing regulations that would have great bearing on Westport should an offshore wind developer seek to land cabling on Horseneck Beach. Straight out of the gate is the proposal that any subsurface easement will be deemed to affect 0 acres. If the surface is tidied up within 24 months of the initial impact. The 0 acres clause for subsurface easement is a novel regulatory construct, absent from prior policy. The idea that what is done beneath the ground has no effect on a natural area as long as no one can see it is absurd. Throughout the proposed regulations, it is stated that the EEA secretary will be allowed sole discretion on all manner of findings and determinations, including natural resource valuation, funding in lieu of replacement lands, and waivers or modifications. The Secretary's discretion is most frequently based on whether the property, this is quote, the proposed Article 97 action serves a significant public purpose, public interest, or is determined to provide greater public benefit than the Article 97 property does in and of itself. This raises legitimate risk of bias, particularly if public benefit is interpreted to favor renewables over preservation. At no point throughout the proposed regulations is the option of denying siting for an energy project even mentioned. And just so you know, a public hearing, this is the third public hearing they've had. They've reopened it because of, they got so much feedback on it. So they are having another public hearing on the Article 97 alterations that's scheduled for this coming Wednesday, March 26th. And if you wish to comment, you will need to register, and I'm happy to send you information as to how to do that if you just let me know that you're interested in doing it. So.
Thanks, Constance. I took down a few notes while you were going on the intervener stuff. I think the concern probably the town has, the select board and others, is with regards to the climate energy bill that passed last year that takes away a lot of the local cities and towns' ability to, push back or at least ask questions. So my guess is the intervener status is probably the best way to go for entities in Westport that would be concerned and want obviously a seat at the table. As John's pointed out, with that climate energy bill, there's going to be public comment periods with the drafting of the regulations, because that would be where the town would go to get access to funds for, if we wanted to hire our own engineers, our own specialists with respect to data. That probably will not be rolled out till mid-2026 in order to get that and possibly even the intervener status, which will be part of that as well. But I think to Constance's point is, I think the more organizations that have a seat at the table in town would probably give us a little bit more of an ability to have a say. My concern, I've voiced this in various other meetings, is the fact that with Article 97, it's a state beach property, and then everyone knows if you look at a GIS map of 88, they own about, some cases as low as 200 feet to as high as 600 feet on the northbound side of 88, which is their easement. I mean, that was always there in the assumption that they would have to expand 88 into 2 lanes each way. But that's what that would be there for. So my concern, sitting on this committee at least, is does that take away a lot of the town's ability with a community host agreement? Do we have a lot of say if they're essentially landing on state property and running it up state property? Does it take the town out of that mix, especially with the climate energy bill and the 11-member siting board that has been created as well? So,
By the way, to that point, this new climate bill makes it so that they encourage community, they would encourage a company for benefit agreements, for a host benefit agreement, but it's not required. So they could choose to or not.
So I think where we're getting at is the more groups that can be involved, if this goes forward into that permitting and licensing process, we have more of a seat at the table to have discussions and input in that process, given that the state has gone in their direction with respect to green energy and where the local cities and towns and their ability to affect that. So I think that was the point on that intervener, that we need to stay obviously on top of the postings, the state postings, whether Vineyard Offshore moves forward in any respect and starts applying to the state would be obviously the opportunity for us and others in town to be involved. So that was kind of, I think, what we're trying to get across is that, even abutters and property owners along that stretch, you could have probably as many as, oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand up. 1 second. I didn't, you could have as many as, count them all the way up 88. You could have 50 property owners all the way up there because they're possibly could be losing a buffer to 88 or impacts. And, many of you may know that, if there's a high tension power lines, some people don't want to buy houses near there. So do you want to buy a house with an EMF cable running in your backyard? So that would be concerns for those property owners. Sorry, John?
No, that's right. 3 points, I guess. One, I think our charge is basically to advise the select board on impacts of offshore wind on Westport. And I think the intervener status is outside our charge. But I do agree with Constance that I think that's a good idea to explore intervener status for the reasons that she said, that it gives us, or the select board really, a seat at the table and more influence in decisions. So even though I think it's outside our charge, I think it's a good idea to explore that. And but that is where my agreement with Constance ends. I think that it is not a surprise that that I come to the table not in with the upfront position in opposition to offshore wind. I am here to try and understand what the impacts to Westport are of offshore wind, not to just oppose offshore wind. And I think that if we are going to have a seat at the table, I would hope the seat is occupied by someone who is interested in understanding what the impacts are, not someone who is just going to oppose something regardless of whatever the facts may be.
It doesn't really matter if we oppose it or not, John.
I didn't interrupt you, Constance. We give deference
Doesn't.
to you. I know you're not going to put quotes around clean energy. I remember the energy provided by Bouchard Oil and how it spread all over Horseneck Beach. That's the energy you favor, is fossil fuels. So I'm actually a fan of clean energy, and I don't put quotes around it. I think we need clean energy. But that's where you and I differ. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Don't characterize
So-
what I believe and what I don't.
Constance.
Maybe other people would have
Constance.
some input to
Constance,
this.
Please, I'm Chair.
Questions about intervener status.
Okay, first off,
I have a question.
yep. Thank you, Shauna.
You're welcome. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. It's hard to get attention over here. You're looking that way. I actually do think it's the charge of this committee to recommend to the select board that we take up intervener status. Because if I'm a select board member that hasn't been in these meetings and they come to town with a, hey, would you like to be an intervener? I'd say, what does the wind committee think? And that's actually what I wanted the wind committee to do, to kind of advise you. So I firmly believe that the town, as a municipality, sounds like we will be notified, and the town administrator notifies us all kinds of stuff all the time. So while I appreciate you're keeping an eye on it just in case, I feel like it sounds like we can't, there's no action to take on intervener status until
Correct.
that has happened, right? So there's nothing really to do about that now, except it's helpful to know about it so that the day it comes up, it won't be a, what the heck is this? And I think your point about other groups that are not the municipality, certainly they would need some runway. I agree with John, though, because I wouldn't want the intervener to be someone who is anti-wind necessarily. For one, I don't think they'd be very effective in that group. I think what we need someone there to be very strongly pro-Westport, right? So we'd want to make sure that we have a voice at the table when they're talking about trenching or easements or how long construction's going to take or what kind of variances they need and things like that. So I think that, I mean, I think it should be someone knowledgeable but more neutral. But I think that the intervener is a good idea when it comes up.
Yeah, and I think it'll end up being the town being the intervener status, and then however that
The
plays
town would
out.
delegate
yeah.
somebody.
Delegate someone to sit on that. And I think when it gets to that point, we can, as a committee, vote on, whether we want intervener status. And I would imagine that even,
Yeah.
John would support that. So I think
Yeah.
we're at the point where
Absolutely.
if it gets to that point, we'll take a vote from the committee and then recommend that we seek intervener status for the town. And then we, however that's decided upon as to who sits on it, whether it's a select board member or whether it's, the town administrator or the lawyer or, a town council. So I think that works. And I think it's important because I think as time goes on, as we've seen, these projects get more and more costly. It's inflation, we all know that, and with tariffs now, we all understand that the blades and the raw materials for all of these projects will be more costly. So I think there's less of a payback that would come back to the town as well if there are those increased variable costs. So I think to protect the town, I know there's always discussions about, the economic benefit to the town if something like this were to come, but I don't necessarily think it may be as lucrative. I kind of compare it to casinos or dispensaries, right? As you expand and put more and more, there's less of a return with respect to that. So with the costs and everything with this, I think that, the town having a seat at the table, because it could be a situation where there may not be much payback to the town.
I think, to follow up what you're saying, Jake, and what Sean is saying, we have to keep an eye on this. I think you said it was a 21-day window, so once we're notified, or the state posts, we have 21 days to get back to them, or they take control of the bus. So we should keep an eye on that. This committee should keep an eye on that so that we can schedule a meeting in the interim to make sure that we don't miss that 21-day window.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think, Jake, just the concern that you brought up, which I think is interesting, because about whether the town would get any revenue at all from a taxation point of view or a host community agreement. We have an agreement on Horseneck Beach, for example, and we get quite a bit of state revenue, or payment in lieu of, it's payment in lieu of taxes, right, that we get. So I assumed that we would still be able to collect, we're still hosting valuable equipment here, and we should get some taxation from that. But I think it's interesting that you say that we would have to learn more about that as time, if a project arose, but.
Yeah, I just see that as a little
I don't think,
concerning.
my gut feel is it's not millions of dollars, because
That-
nothing is millions of dollars, but there probably is some money coming to the town through all that, but
Yeah.
we won't know until there's a project.
Appreciate that. All right, I think that covers,
Maybe speak-
I'm sorry, does anyone in the crowd want to speak about the intervener status? Nobody? Okay. Wait. Yes, ma'am.
Janice Dye, Main Road.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that I've been coming to the meetings, and I'm really appreciative of the research and information that you're giving to the community, so we can, be proactive as things progress. And I do appreciate your hours of research and informing your community.
Well, I appreciate that, and it goes.
Thank you.
The credit goes to, obviously, the select board for developing this. Constance spends a lot of her time and effort doing a ton of research, so it's very helpful. And I think we pointed out earlier, this is probably the first advisory role for a town. We were, kind of a first mover with respect to seeing that, and again, that's the select board and others pushing that forward. So it does, and I know Vineyard Offshore saw what, last month, a pretty substantial turnout of citizens and concerns. So when they have support and buy-in from the mayor of New London, Groton, and Waterford, all supportive and wanting that to go in there, it may be a longer route, but they may want to go there instead. So that may, again, be helpful for us.
I just would
sorry.
like to say that for the town to get intervener status, it's really, it's not a huge deal.
Yeah.
For other people, I went in and was reading what all you have to do to apply for intervener status, and it really isn't the most complex thing in the world. But you just kind of should be aware that that is an option. And if you're with a neighborhood that would want to do something like that, just to have it in the back of your minds that if this happens, you might get in touch with this lawyer or look at what is required beforehand, just so you're, to be forearmed, to be aware of what's happening, maybe is to be forearmed, so.
Thanks, Constance. So that, I think, concludes our intervener topic. The next one was going to be an opportunity for one of our committee members, Christopher Thrasher. He is unable to attend this evening, but, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but nor do I pretend to know about these pieces of legislation, but he did introduce through a citizen's petition some legislation in Boston dealing with kind of offshore wind and kind of the process with offshore wind. There are 3 bills. I can give you the numbers. You can look them up and just take a glance at them, and then maybe at a later date, I'll let him kind of describe what his thought process was in putting those out. I just pulled the bill numbers. It's bill number 4317, 4318, and 4319, all House bills. So House Bill 4317, 4318, and 4319, all dealing with, obviously, offshore wind and via a citizen petition in Boston, which you can introduce legislation that way. But
Can you give us a summary of any of them, kind of what their general
Those are all
scope
House
is?
bills, right?
yes, they are all House bills. A lot of it's dealing with kind of the, eligibility, kind of decommissioning, the extended producer responsibility program, which would essentially be the decommissioning of offshore wind equipment, as we discussed kind of earlier today. But again, I would prefer him he kind of drafted the bills and went through them. So hopefully at the next meeting, maybe we can get him to cover.
I think one of those, which I think is really good, is that should there be some sort of another blade failure or some sort of incidents where we get chemicals or blade parts washing up, whose responsibility that is to clean up, and that there should be some assurance from the companies that they will take care of it. And we should demand that, the state should demand that those assurances are legal.
And that would be Bill 4318.
That would be it?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I knew there was one, because I thought, well, yeah, I mean, that seems like a reasonable thing to ask for.
And that one's titled the Establishing an Extended Producer Responsibility Program for Offshore Wind Energy Equipment. So that would be 4318. But again, I don't want to take Mr. Thrasher's time and allow him to introduce or at least explain them a little bit better. So maybe we can get him to address that at a different date. So we're getting towards the end of our agenda. The one item that was interesting to me is I got an email March 17th, whenever that was, a couple of days ago, from a Michael Lombardi, essentially requesting the opportunity to speak at an offshore wind. He basically says, I'd like to take steps on getting on the agenda for Westport's wind meetings to present some of the issues he's been studying with respects to plastics. Obviously, he says there's much more research needed, but he does have maybe a 20-minute presentation essentially on his study and analysis of sand on both Elephant Rock Beach and beaches along Cherry and Webb from the blade failure last year, with the debris washing ashore. And he did point out or caveat that to the fact that he doesn't have any data on the front end, but obviously will probably work with others to determine that, but saying essentially that he's found higher levels than expected of microplastics along the shoreline. So he's got his own research firm reached out to me. His 25-year career in both marine sciences and underwater marine construction. So I don't know if that's something that we would want to put. That's one of our discussion points is setting the next meeting date as well as maybe putting an agenda together. I don't know if anyone has any concerns with maybe just hearing a presentation from him with what he's somewhat studied here in Westport, and if, you know,
I'd definitely like to hear, actually, I know about the study that he's done. He took soil samples down from the beach at Elephant Rock, and he was, I mean, he did it, he knows what he's doing, and I know that he has spent the last 3 months doing data analysis, sending them off to different laboratories to see if there's any match with the microplastics and materials that he's finding that he found on Elephant Rock Beach with what the blade was composed of. And so I know that he was looking at that, but I think that, and what Jake was saying about there's no front-end data, I think what he is concerned about and other scientists are concerned about is that we don't have any baseline data. So we don't know what was in the sand before that blade break. And we're not getting baseline data from this around the region. And it would seem that it would be a good idea to get such data from various localities, Nantucket and all around Horseneck, to see what happens, what we've got now, and then should something else happen, do we have more? I think that's kind of the only way that you can find out.
Rick was first.
Rick was first. Thank you, Shauna. Rick?
Mr. Chairman, a couple of things on that. Can you share that with us?
Yeah.
That came to me by text this afternoon, and I thought it was spam, so they went in a dumper. I get so much of that stuff. And so I saw something about microplastics, and I
Yeah.
sent it on its way because who knows. But I'd like to read that before, I don't want to waste everybody's time if this is something that we shouldn't be talking, that isn't within the charge of this committee. But then again, if it is, I think it's of value. The second thing is regarding people who might want to speak in front of us next time, I would like to, hopefully we can get someone from SMAS to come here and talk about funding, what's available, what studies they have. I know they do a lot of good work over there, and I think that they could come forward, if they want to come and talk to us, could certainly enlighten us into what my passion is on this committee is what is the impact going to be to fisheries as that cable, if that cable ever comes and creates a fence north to south on the Westport River.
Could I follow up on what Rick was saying? Because SMAS has been doing research, you mentioned the baseline issue, to establish a baseline on impact on offshore wind on various fisheries. I wish I could be more specific, but I've just been listening to this kind of discussion around the periphery, but I know it's around establishing baseline on impact on various fisheries. And what I could do, Mr. Chair, if you want, is email you and Kevin Stokesbury, the dean, as I mentioned, he's a Westport resident, and say, Kevin, would you be interested in attending one of our meetings, up to you and the chair to figure out what the schedule is, and perhaps bring whoever the key professors are who've been, the principal investigators doing this work, because it might not be Kevin, it might be, one or two of the other professors. Okay. But I think this could be valuable, not only the work they've already done, but also, as we mentioned when the state folks were here, and as you mentioned tonight, there may be financial resources available to us that could where if that money came to us, we might retain SMAS to do some further work along those lines, tailored to exactly our needs. And as I mentioned, and Mr. Herron can, I think, testify to this, SMAS has excellent relations with working fishermen in this area because they use their platforms and the fishermen themselves in conducting the science. And so the results tend to be overwhelmingly accepted by fishermen. And so I think I would very much like to hear Mr. Lombardi's work, regardless of whether we have a baseline or not, because I think he's done a lot of stuff. The plastic was on our beach. I'd love to hear what he had to say about that. Plastic pollution in the ocean is an enormous problem. So if he's ready to go, I think, hearing him first would be great, but I think having Kevin come and say, what have you done to date and what might you do in the future if you had some resources specific to Westport, not just what's in the Westport River, because, we have fishermen who fish outside the Westport River. So what impacts Westport isn't necessarily just what goes on in the Westport River.
Okay. So if there are no objections, maybe we can put me in contact with SMAS.
Kevin,
We can figure that out, and then with Michael Lombardi as a alternative, and figure out which one we can fit in for that April timeframe. And
Could
if-
we do both?
Yeah, that's what I mean, that's what I'm getting at.
We could try, yeah,
Not the same
yeah.
night.
I mean, I think it's
What's that?
time to.
Not the same night.
No, that's what I'm saying. Do we
No, we
want?
could do, why couldn't we do it the same night? I mean, I think Mike Lombardi's presentation would take about a half an hour. And then, it would be great. I think it'd be great to start hearing from people
Well-
on specific
Right.
topics.
I'll put Kevin in touch with you. If you
Okay,
put them
yeah, well, we
together
can
on the
figure,
same night.
we can figure, yeah, if it's the same night or either way, we can.
I mean, and he might have some really good questions. I mean, he's a marine scientist himself. He might have some good
Yeah.
questions to ask. They might have a nice back and forth.
Yeah, and we'll figure out who would come from them, and with Michael, maybe we can do it on the same night. I would like to almost dedicate full time to maybe one individual so that we can have questions and answer, but we'll,
I know Michael's ready to go with it, and I think there's a sense of urgency in it because before things start back up again, the idea of looking at what is this going to mean regionally, and what do we need to do to get some baseline data in terms of, what the oceans, what our beaches are now, and what they will be as this construction continues.
Okay. So we'll just see scheduling wise, if they can both come in April, we can do that. If not, we'll have one and maybe the other one in May, or whatever works scheduling wise. And to that point, that's our next agenda item. Do you guys want to look into April as to if we have anything on?
You mean May or June? April.
April for the next meeting.
Okay, yeah.
If you want, we can go, we can keep
So-
scheduling.
So I think a month, if you look 4 weeks is April 17, or 5 weeks would be April 24.
Can we do April 24? If everybody's.
Shauna is.
Thursdays are free. Thursdays are just for
perfect.
you, Jake.
It is for us?
And this meeting, oh, no, well, climate resilience. When is the climate resilience meeting?
John, do we have one?
I'm looking at the wrong calendar.
April 20,
Oh,
April 24th, I'm having surgery. What's the April 17th?
I can do April 17th.
17th
okay.
works.
All right.
Yeah,
Does that
good.
work for you?
Yeah.
Good.
Shauna? Go- Okay.
Okay.
So we're looking at, for the next meeting would be April 17th. Again, I will be contacting the possible presenters for that meeting. And then the agenda, I usually try to put a week in advance. It's usually on the front page of the town website or on the town clerk's website as well. So April 17th will be the next offshore wind
5:30?
at 5:30. Yes, same time, same place.
And so maybe we would have, I know that Michael is ready to go with that, so we could have Michael and then maybe even SMAS.
Yeah, it's all going to come down to scheduling if they can make it.
Okay. And we were going to talk about other possible presentations as well, right?
We can, if,
Well, I think we should, because I think for some people, it takes a little bit of advance notice. And I really do think that after this, after Michael and SMAS, that I really do think we should have the discussion about the increase in whale and marine mammal deaths. And I think it would be good to have a couple of different perspectives on that. So,
do we,
I mean,
You have-
I know,
Yeah, I talked to him, he said he's not gonna engage. He's been, for
Okay.
various reasons, he said who he won't, the aquarium won't, they're all,
is that afraid of federal funding?
all,
They're afraid of
been
getting,
intimidated, so that they don't wanna get involved.
okay.
they won't come and talk about what
No.
their theories on whale deaths and stuff around.
No, they've
I'm
been,
sorry, why?
I think they're afraid
They're
of
worried about
federal funding.
I've asked them,
Push back.
they've engaged before, and
Would-
they don't wanna do it again.
So no one that you have asked has been
Yeah,
willing to
I
go?
asked them.
What about somebody from URI?
I haven't talked to anyone at URI.
Well, maybe they would come.
Yeah,
But because I would love to get a small panel so
Yeah.
that there can be a real back and
Yeah.
forth. I mean, I
Yeah.
think it would be, I'd like to hear.
I would like that too.
back and
I
forth.
asked them, and they said, I've engaged before, and I don't want to do it again.
Engaged where? Not here. Not here. Okay, well, okay.
Not here, no.
To that end, I have a couple of people I'd like to suggest.
Okay.
And I can follow up with you later, or we can, we don't have to vote on it tonight, but.
No.
But if we can get a few people lined up to talk about that and maybe get some input from others, I think it would be a fascinating panel discussion to have, maybe in May or June.
Yep, let's schedule that tentatively for May, and maybe if you have contacts at URI to see if we can find another expert that would be willing to present with, who you recommend. That would, we could do that probably in the May timeframe unless something changes.
Reach out to Roger Williams as well. They're very engaged.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you need another panel.
Okay.
And what about another topic being the impacts on the fishing community? I would think that would be very interesting for
Would that be
our community.
who we're going to bring in April from SMAS?
SMAS may have some people.
So maybe we can bring that up when they're here to see if they have.
I think the SMAS might end up with some other people that we want to go down another rabbit hole with,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
I think that if they give a kind of a good overview of the things they're working on, then we might find some other ones we would like more information on.
Okay.
I mean, NOAA, where I used to work, they're just shell-shocked right now.
Yeah,
They're,
I'm frankly not all that interested in having an argument between we're killing the whales, no, we're not.
Yeah.
I don't know that would be a productive use of our time.
I think that
But I understand, to have an actual conversation about it I could see that it would be useful. I have a hard time imagining it coming off
Very well.
calm and productive.
Well, I don't know. There's a world-class, I can never say the word, acoustician, that's been doing original research and has actually gone out and measured pile driving from Vineyard Wind and has measured the seismic testing.
I feel confident that person would love to present in front of us. What I think you're talking about on a dialogue is also having people saying, no, this is actually the cause of these deaths. I think that's where you're going to have trouble getting.
I think it'd be really
a
interesting to have a couple of real knowledgeable people because I think that is, we've been getting dead whales.
I also think it would be
on our-
interesting.
on
I just
our-
have a hard time understanding how we would pull it off, how you'd get somebody to volunteer.
Well, I think that you get.
But maybe you know somebody, maybe other people know somebody.
I do, actually, they're much more level temperament and very, very well-spoken and very gentle about it and have original data on this. I mean, I think that the fact that whales and dolphins are washing up on our beaches is
Correlation is not causation.
is an,
This is-
I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that there is a lot of information out there that points to things that are being done that are being overlooked by the wind companies, such as the fact that that the air guns that they're using to do the seismic testing for the laying of cables and the mapping of the seafloor are really not all that different and have been measured at the same intensity levels as the air guns they use to do sub-bottom profiling for the oil and gas industry. So, and that has been a real source, that has been something that NOAA has said you can't do during migration periods. There's also a lot of data on just how loud the pile driving is and from how far away it is. Whereas I do know from reading several sources that they are only required to stop or to pause with the pile driving if they see a North Atlanta right whale within, 500 meters?
So let me ask you a question, as long as we're on this topic. When you know that 87% of whales have evidence of being entangled,
That's not true, John.
yes, it is true.
No, it's
And
not.
50% entangled.
I don't think we should
Twice.
have this conversation.
Yeah,
Well,
I think,
I don't
that's
think-
what Shauna says, you don't want to have the
I
conversation.
don't want to have the conversation, and I don't want it with you, but I do think that having people that have
So-
real knowledge about
so-
it because I would love
So
to hear what they have
when
to
whales are
say.
entangled in lobster gear, you have no interest in going after the lobster industry, which exists in the port
I
of
personally
Westport.
don't, that's not my job. I mean,
No,
So,
but your
all right,
job
so
is
I'm
to
gonna-
go after the wind industry.
I want to interrupt.
Shauna,
So, this is where I think that is pile driving hurting the whales or not? We're not in control of whether there's any pile driving out there. Westport has no say over whether there's pile driving out there. We do get impacted when a large marine mammal washes up on the beach, and it does affect us, and we have to deal with it,
figure out
right?
how to deal with it.
So, I mean, on the one hand, it kind of does affect Westport, but on the other hand, I do not see a scenario where that is nothing other than people yelling at each other in a very large room. And it's not because I think one side is right or wrong, it's just that I don't think it would be a productive use of time. Now, what do we do with the whales that do wash on shore? Maybe that's something we need to think about, and how are we handling that, or how might we handle that in the future? That would impact Westport, because this is Westport Animal Control, Westport Highway Department. I mean, Westport departments are out there on the beach when these mammals wash up, right? So maybe we need to think about that, but if you can find someone who is these things are not hurting the whales at all, who wants to come and have a calm conversation, maybe we entertain that as a topic. But-
okay.
So
Well, but there are people that have been doing original research.
Yeah, I
that never-
hear you, but you're talking a lot about the research and not letting John talk about the other side, too.
I don't want to engage.
Right, you're not, because
No,
you're
you don't.
saying, but you're talking about it.
Don't know what you're talking about.
all right.
Anyway, I
Okay.
think that with the SMAST, I think with
Yep.
the study, if someone's done some local studies on the local beaches, I think that's a really good topic.
I-
I think the SMAST people are going to kind of give us some other areas to
Direction.
think about. And also, sometimes committees take summer hiatuses, so maybe if you get through May or June and we talk about whether it makes sense to meet in July and August.
I agree with you,
impacts on
Shauna, and what
Fishing
you,
community would be a good one.
what you're saying makes sense. Let's do this a step at a time, not get too far out there. If we have
We have
those two
April.
people come in at different times, who knows what they're gonna open up for us, or what they're not gonna open up, and then we can go from there.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so we have the date for April 17th. We'll have either Michael Lombardi, and we'll you'll put me in contact with SMAS, we'll get somebody from there, and they will probably provide us, other maybe directions to go in, and it may not be all that night, we may have one in April and one in May, but then we can kind of reassess where we're at.
What do we decided, April 17th? Is that what we decided?
April 17th. Are you already conflicted?
I forgot to put it on the, no, I forgot to put it on the
It
calendar.
already got booked?
I do hope we will continue meeting in the summer, only because that's when our summer residents are here.
We can talk about
Yeah.
that for sure.
I mean, otherwise, there's a whole segment of Westport that's not engaged.
All right,
Move
I
to
did,
adjourn?
well, we did have approval of minutes on the agenda. Christopher didn't get them to us yet. We're not in arrears. We still have, he said he'll probably get it to us by the end of this week, so at least you'll be able to review them. At the next meeting, we'll probably approve a couple of months' worth of meetings. So that would be it. Now, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
First and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.